All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to neighborhoodnewsstudio.com. We got a great week ahead of you and a great day ahead of you as well. We got John O'Loughlin live from the Arlington Cemetary coming up at 11 a.m. Just going to be thrown over to him in a second. We got George Webb at 12 p.m. We're doing a Mark Kulak replay at 2 p.m., a neighborhood news hour at 4 p.m., and Dr. Linda Lee Tarver is going to be joining us at 5 p.m. for her very first show on neighborhoodnewsstudio.com. Are you battle ready? All right. Now to get the day started off, I'm going to kick it over to Mr. John O'Loughlin at Arlington National Cemetery.
Well, hello, everybody. I am John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives 3. We're on Neighborhood News Studio this morning, as usual, at 11 o'clock. And, about a week ago, we got a notice that there's going to be a funeral here for Marcia's aunt. Marcia's aunt, Lucy Keith. And it's an incredible occasion. We're here early to just talk a little bit about Arlington Cemetery and about the what it's all about. But Lucy Keith was a veteran of the Army in the Pacific in World War II, and she lived to be 101 years old, I think. Her extended family will be here, so we're going to be participating in a formal Arlington Memorial Cemetery funeral that won't start until 1 o'clock. So got a little bit of time to just spend some time with you and the folks here at the cemetery, of which there are thousands and thousands and thousands. Let me, if I may, try to, oops, it didn't work. All right, I'm going to show you just some of these gravestones as I walk along here. And if you drive in here, you'll notice that there's many thousands of these graves. Ever since the Civil War, we are under the flight path of National Airport, or if you will, Washington Reagan National Airport. But I think, it's you can't be here and not be humbled by the thousands and thousands of these gravestones of people who gave their lives so that we could be free. Just acres and acres and acres of them. So my wife's father is here, and her mother is buried with him up in the mausoleum. He was a captain in U.S. Army, World War II. Was not in combat, but arrived as they were discovering the horrors of the Holocaust, and I'm sure was seared by that. Clifford Keith was his name. So we honor him, and we honor all the people and their families that sacrificed so that we could be free. Right in front of us is the Pentagon. I'll turn here so maybe you can see that's Marcia walking away there, walking down, and you can't quite see the Pentagon, but it's right just past where you see her walking. I was this morning watching a video by Stephen Kinzer being interviewed at Massachusetts Historical Society 2 years ago for his book, The True Flag. And it was during my watching that I realized that, the country did change with Teddy Roosevelt. It changed at the same time that the robber barons but the real connection between our government and the British government was sealed by Teddy Roosevelt. And what a reversal from the Revolutionary War. But also, the main change was that we became an empire. That our soldiers and their families made sacrifices not just to protect our homeland, not just to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, but to do something entirely outside the Constitution and something outside the words of the Declaration of Independence, something that Kinzer was able to just put together in a nutshell and say, well, just like Henry Cabot Lodge said, the rights and liberties of the Bill of Rights are there for white people. And it's our job to go out around the world and spread the joy of our civilization. And hopefully maybe we can educate and free these people from their misery, as if they were miserable just because they didn't belong to the American upper class and the American. One of the things that always bugs me is, I think in some ways the smarter you get in education, the dumber you get in understanding humanity and nature and reality. Of course, now we've got this situation where everybody's knowledge is stovepiped to the point where I'm the definition of an expert, right? Definition of an expert is someone who gradually, through education and experience, gets to know more and more and more about a subject that is tinier and tinier and tinier, so that at the pinnacle of his career, he knows absolutely everything about absolutely nothing. And one of the sayings in Alcoholics Anonymous is that there's you don't meet anybody that's too dumb to get the program, but there are a lot of people that are too smart to get it. AA is a good program, but we just keep on walking and contemplating all of these lives given up for freedom. So did we decide as a country that we no longer wanted to support the individual against the oligarchy? And we decided, well, no, we want to be part of the oligarchy. As a matter of fact, we want to run the whole world. Well, no. The only people that did that were those elites sitting in their penthouses on Wall Street. And the racists like Henry Cabot Lodge. They're the ones that said, we are going to take up the white man's burden. We're going to go out and save the Philippines, save Hawaii, from the destiny of living under their own chosen government. And, there's an awful lot of racism in this whole idea. Remember the famous football commentator, Jimmy the Greek, who once actually got in trouble for speaking his mind. He said he didn't think, or he was surprised that black people could be quarterbacks. Yeah, you can be a running back, you can be a lineman, you can be a tackle, but to be a quarterback, you have to have brains, right? That's the attitude that this elite of our country has had, that somehow they have the brains and nobody else does. And so in order to enforce that, they send our young best and brightest out to fight against people who really are not our enemies and just want to live free on their own. But as Stephen Kinzer says in that video, it's about 40 minutes worth looking at. And I've ordered his book to get all the details. He really does do a good interview. And you know, I got so much out of his book, The Brothers, about the Dulles brothers. But I had a problem at the end because it seemed to me that he was saying that this is who we are as Americans. We have been through the stage of individual rights, and now we've been through the stage of imperialism. But it's all us. We own it. And I don't like the idea of we own, you know, the imperialistic side of what our government has done since Teddy Roosevelt, you know, whose roots are both with the Confederacy and with the British Empire. Sorry, my hair is messed up. But I don't like, and I don't think that it's fair for the common, ordinary people of the United States to be blamed for what these elites with their banks and their secret societies and their institutions have been able to do with the power that we've entrusted them with. And I think if we want to honor these thousands and thousands of veterans and their families, if we want to honor them, then we need to get back to the Declaration of Independence and all men are created equal. And it didn't say anything about white men. It didn't say anything about race at all. Because that's not who we are. We're not people that discriminate based upon racial characteristics. It's not who we are in our hearts. However, the society that we grew up in is racist because it's governed from the elites at the top. And this is the problem. If you have, you know, look at World War I. By that time, most of the people in the South was still bitter against the North and still not necessarily willing to go and fight for the American flag, which their ancestors, their fathers and brothers had fought against. But they came up with a solution, and it was Hollywood. And Hollywood, D.W. Griffith, The Birth of a Nation, and this incredible propaganda film that was shown all over the country about how the noble white knights are going to rise up and save the country from the hooligans, the blacks, the disaster that was just around the corner if we didn't save America from this racial integration. But we can't really appreciate how deeply that false idea of one race being better than another has gotten buried into our country's psyche, that now we're doing this thing called critical race theory, that this race or that race has always been cruel to that other race, that there's something inherent in people of Caucasian race that makes them abuse people of other races. Well, That's them trying to convince us that what they've done is natural. But it's not natural. Think of the children who don't give a darn what each other's color is. They just want to play. They want to be brothers and sisters. They want to be part of something beautiful. Well, there's Mike DeSantis. I see Andy's putting him up there, and it's a good idea to talk about this. In my Facebook feed the other day, there was a black musician who I respect very much. He had posted this picture of I guess he's kind of a Georgia goober guy with the overhauls and everything, and he's pointing over at the horizon. And he says, "Right over there, that's where that book attacked me." And this is, of course, a reaction to some objections and bans of certain books having to do with teaching children at a young age about sexuality. And I think Governor DeSantis is absolutely right in saying, before third grade, or, don't go there. And if you're going to teach children something about mental health, make sure their parents know what you're going to tell them. And let the parents be in charge of the indoctrination or teaching about mental health and sexuality and all those things that really the government is trying to take over. I don't think we are taking seriously enough the encroachment upon individual liberty right now. And I'd like to think that, these legions of soldiers would rise up and fight to save us, to save our posterity from the totalitarian nightmare that we all see coming. But we can't wait for some man on horseback or some genius, Don't think Elon Musk is going to save you, One of my shows a couple of years ago was about Isaac Asimov and his Foundation trilogy, which is one of the most seminal works in our science fiction genre, right? And his idea, what you learn in there is that he is, through his character, the mule, appropriately named, right? He is using evil to do good. He's saying if we can spend 1,000 years forcing humanity into our ideas, forcing humanity to become what we want them to be, right overhead. But if we can create what really is an H.G. Wells idea of a small elite that runs everything behind the scenes, and everybody else just lives these very ignorant but happy lives, That's consistent with what's happening. They're dumbing us down. They're dumbing our children down. They're dumbing down our education. They're taking away real history and supplying this casuistry that we've talked about. The idea that the wise people get to go back and massage the truth to make a story, a narrative that the common people will be able to live with. Us common people that give up our children to war. Yeah, we could live with that. We're just living day to day. We don't think about the future. We don't worry about the past. We're just happy little humanoids with very, very little concern about anything, because everything's taken care of, That idea from Foundation is that there are people that he calls the traders, the Traders. And this is what I think that he's saying, is that like the China trade, like they go out and they trade in opium or human beings or whatever else it takes to make that money that's necessary to compress history down into 1,000 years that would have taken 100,000 years. You know, that's the idea, that we're doing this great thing by, well, yeah, we had to kill a couple of 100,000 Filipinos. Yeah, you know, John O'Loughlin's dad had to go. Yeah, we got all of these people that are still harping up on human rights and, right to bear arms and all that. And we got to get rid of them because they're not going to be the ideal citizens of the new world. But you can't see all of these gravestones and not realize that that's a con. And all of these people, with all their devotion to freedom and individual rights and the pursuit of happiness, they made these sacrifices so we could be here and try to do better for the next generation. So how can we hope to do better with the leadership we have right now? We can't. They're completely shutting down our voices. Just like Twitter shut me down. And then I see that they're adding social credit scores to Italy now. It's not just China, it's Italy. All these people died so that we could live free. And all the leaders in the world are imposing digital currency and personal identification and satellites that are going to track everything and everybody. And they're imposing it, and it's just happening while we obsess over some little thing like what's happened to this journalist or who was mistreated at the Oscars. So a lot of thoughts going through my mind. Let's give a moment of thought for Lucy Keith, an Army nurse from World War II. Gave her life, her family, sacrifice, and lived to 101 years of age. And I was asking Marcia earlier, I said, well, I wonder if she's going to be the last female World War II veteran buried here at Arlington Cemetary. It's a question I want to ask the authorities when we get inside. Well, I don't know if you can possibly see behind me, but there's the Air Force Memorial. There it is, just off just right there. And it's just a couple of big arcing steel structures representing, I guess, the takeoff of a jet or a rocket or something. So here we are, and I can even see the dome. Well, no, take that back. That's not what I thought it was. But the Pentagon's right over there. That's where my dad spent his last 10 years working for our country to keep us free. And this is probably as much as I can do this morning. I'm going to have to catch up with Marcia and head over to the administration building in a few minutes. But, these are my thoughts, that when America became an empire, it became a racist empire. And enforcing racist principles abroad allows us to enforce them here at home. And we haven't gotten rid of racism here. I don't care what anybody says. It's an endemic problem. I might have told you about this fellow that I knew when I first started practicing law. He was ran a tow truck company, and really nice fella. And we had a black man elected as the county executive of Prince George's County, where I lived at the time. And my friend's comment was, but won't they just screw it all up? And I think you have to stop and consider the idea that this person, he's been taught that you can't trust black people to run complicated things like being a quarterback. And it's not true at all. It's absolutely obscenely false. But that's what the empire depends on. If they can't say we're better than them, then they can't have an empire. And, you have a church like the Catholic Church, which has favored slavery for almost all of its existence. I don't know if they ever did come out against it, frankly. But it's an institution that was all over the South when the South was enslaving hundreds and thousands of people. It's not the only one, but I think it gets off free a lot where it should be held to account. Catholic Church. Well, I'm just going to stop for a moment and think about all of these great people, honest people that did what they wanted, what they thought was right. Now let's do what we think is right. All right, Andy DeBala, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Thanks very much for hosting this morning. And I will talk to you again tomorrow here at Neighborhood News Studio. Everybody have a great day. Bye now.
Thank you to Mr. John O'Loughlin for your appearance today from Arlington National Cemetery. It's always, I don't know if any of you in the audience have been out there before, but I got his book right here. But it's a very historical place. It has a very somber vibe to it, and it really you gain a lot of perspective when you walk onto the grounds on what was sacrificed to build the foundation of America, and that was people fighting for their freedoms and the future freedoms of the world. And we need to continue to fighting for those freedoms as a society. So before we get into I'm just gonna play a little Garland Nixon video leading into Mr. Webb. Before we get into Mr. George Webb on Research Roadshow, I do want to switch gears here a little bit. Mr. Garland Nixon so often appears on McDuff, and we didn't get to air one of these episodes on Neighborhood News Studio, and he digs a lot into the Ukraine war. He knows about the Ukrainian oligarchs and Anthony Blinken and the international rules-based order. So I wanted to play his last episode on McDuff before we get into Mr. George Webb in the Research Roadshow. So please just sit back and enjoy this John O'Loughlin, Garland Nixon episode from last week. Ukraine, Russia, and NATO.
Western media and all of our institutions, and including, all of our corporate institutions, very much in favor of the Ukrainian side. And those of us that kind of study it are we're stepping back saying, wait a minute, you can't just go along with what the media tells you, or and certainly not what the U.S. State Department tells you. You have to step back and look at a little bit of the history of it, and that's something that's hard to get people to focus on, especially when the mainstream media is so powerful and dominates everybody's minds. But this is the effort that you and I and so many others are making. And maybe I just wanted to start off today and say, you're working very, very hard, Garland. You're on Twitter. You're doing all of these shows, radio around the country, and PFW here in DC. What keeps you going? What motivates Garland Nixon? Let's start there.
You know what? Oddly enough, I enjoy it. I've always been intellectually curious. If something happens, I want to know why. And so I guess I'm a natural dissenter, because when I'm told by the powers that be, do this, my first thing is why. When I'm told you should believe this, I want to know why. And I start digging. And a couple of things in life, I think, caused me to gave me great pause. One of them was the whole weapons of mass destruction lie. And that's when I started waking up and realizing I needed to lift the hood and peep around a little bit. And the second was, and as I've said before, I was like a Democrat all my life, kind of a blind sheep, you might say. And then in 2016, when Bernie Sanders ran, and I thought, well, he's running with a different, he's something different. Maybe I'll support him. And they just flat out robbed him. And that's when I woke up and realized, you know what? It's a system. It's not a person here or a person there or a good guy. This is a crooked system. And I thought I was in a democracy. It's not a democracy. And so my curiosity caused me to just start reading. And it's fun finding out this stuff and sharing it with people.
I was delighted when I first encountered you to see on your shelf two of my favorite books. One, the Phoenix Program by Douglas Valentine, and the second one, Blowback by Christopher Simpson. And that just tunes me in right away. I know we're on the same page, and it's just fantastic. So when you decided to start taking a harder look at it, that's about the same time that I was starting to do more to research it myself. I guess it's about 6 or 7 years ago that I started realizing that my dad's story is really important, and I needed to tell it and do the research. And it's about that same time. I was a big Obama guy. I mean, I was very much like you. I worked on his campaign. I spent I was one of the volunteers on his presidential inaugural commission, and drove VIPs around, and was really into it. I got to shake his hand, and I felt like, wow, remember the sign that always said hope on it, and Obama, and I was sold. I was like, yay. And all the people that went down to the mall, and they were all so excited. I mean, it was just a wonderful, friendly, joyous crowd. And I remember, you might have been there too, but when the helicopter, the Marine helicopter with W in it, takes off, the whole crowd just went wild. Thank God it's the end of the Bush era. But then in came Obama, and things didn't change very much. I've been reeling from that myself ever since then. That maybe after, the failing to close down Gitmo was one big sign. But it wore away at me, so that by that time, by 2016 or so, I was sick and tired of Hillary Clinton and all those guys, and I was seeing that Bernie got completely robbed. Whether he was a real honest candidate in the first place, I'm still not sure, because look at his history from where he's been. How did somebody survive in the Senate for so long and not get along and not go along to get along? But I'm done with Bernie. I'm done with the Democrats, and I wish I'm almost done with Trump. It's just that if there's no choice, then I will vote for Trump again. And I hate to say that, but because I believe Trump is just as much a part of it as anyone else is. It's just that he at least is in favor of maintaining our national sovereignty and our economy, as opposed to what's going on now, where it's just intentionally being taken down, being broken, in my opinion. Sorry for the rant, but
No.
I let you take it from there.
Well, and here's the way I feel about Trump. I don't know about you. I'm not a fan of any of them, but I do feel this, that Trump pushed back some in some eras. I think, Biden and Newland and all of those people were doing what they were doing in Ukraine, and they wanted to do it, when Hillary got in 2016, and Donald Trump delayed that. He delayed that. What's happening now would have happened just those many years ago had Trump not won. And that's one of the reasons they hated him, because he was, screwing up their plans. They had all these terrible things they wanted to do, and Donald Trump got in the way. And I fear, to be quite frank, that they will do anything necessary, if you know what I'm getting at, to stop, at this point, to stop Donald Trump or anyone who would expose, let's face it, what if we saw about these biolabs? We don't have to get into that, but when you look at that, you realize that the level of horrible things that they're doing, it rises to such a level. They couldn't allow someone in that would question that. They couldn't allow someone in that would say, are we really doing that? Perhaps we should look into that. So they can't afford that. With everything that's going on, I think they realized, look, we can't afford a person who would think about the average American, who was honest, who wasn't part of this machine. Our necks are out too far. So I feel like we're so far from a democracy that if anyone, including Trump, who would appear to be winning, that they didn't want, there's no link that they won't go to stop that from happening. What do you think? I'm, out on a limb with that one?
No, I think that's exactly the JFK story.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what happened, and JFK's story is like that proverbial dead coyote hanging on the barbed wire fence. It's going to hang there to make sure that all the other coyotes know not to try to cross the barbed wire fence, and so dead Kennedys, the whole just keeping that meme going. Keeps everybody down, keeps everybody from keep your head down. Don't rock the boat. And unfortunately, you're absolutely right. But I do think that Trump represents a side inside the deep state that is not part of the Biden team, and that Trump side is not powerless. So I think that, or he would have been, they would have taken care of him by now.
Yeah.
So, on the other hand, I'd say, what it does expose is that both sides are dirty. Both sides will play dirty, but it's not all one thing. You and I have talked about the blob, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it's not just one blob. It's not Jabba the Hutt,
right?
Driving, telling everybody what to do. That within that there are major factions, and these have developed over history. And Trump was at the top of one of them, at least as the spokesperson, the face of that side. And Hillary Clinton on the other side, of course. Now, they will try, but on the, they're not doing too well. Like, for instance, over in Ukraine, I think they thought they could just bluff Putin into caving and letting them, roll their missiles right up to the Russian border, and go ahead and keep developing those creepy weapons, whatever they're developing. You and I have been watching this carefully, and I guess there's a lot of tension right now over whether or not the Russians are going to be able to prove that there was an actual bioweapons deadly pathogen program being run by or on behalf of the United States of America in Ukraine. I think if Russia can prove that, then America is going to lose whatever moral high ground it still stands on.
I believe that they will. There's some interesting things going on there, but I believe they've got the info. I really do believe that they've got the info. They're saying they do. And, the Russians, and as you know, I've worked for Sputnik for years, and I understand Russian culture, and they're not much on bluffing. The Russian culture is pretty straightforward, very conservative, but an old-fashioned kind of conservative, the old conservative that America used to be, right? And that is a conservative that strives for stability and it's very straightforward, and it believes in moving forward, but and using traditional values to move forward. Now, I'm not necessarily a conservative person. I'm more a lefty, but I have some conservative values. I have some conservative. I know there is a level of conservatism to me to some extent, but overall, I'm a lefty. But I think they have it. But here's something that's interesting, a story that's ongoing now that I'd like to throw out there that I think we'll see how this turns out. So as you probably know, there's a city called Mariupol. And Mariupol was known as this was the Azov Battalion, kind of their headquarters. It was the Azov Battalion, the NAZIs, as they're called. So the Russians said that they got to go. So they, that was hand to hand, a city to city, block by block, as they said, meter by meter. And the Chechens went in, and that's what they're very skilled at, urban warfare. Well, and this is going to get good. You're going to find this interesting, really interesting. So, there are these big steel, they still actually make stuff in that parts of the world. So they got this big steel mill, steel factory, right? So ultimately, and it's huge, and it's concrete and metal and what have you. So ultimately, the remnants of the Azov battalion ended up, the last of them, holed up in this big steel factory place, gigantic complex, surrounded by Russian troops. Here's what's interesting. You're going to find that the people out there are going to find this interesting. So the first thing that happens was there was an attempt to make some daring helicopter rescue and get some people out. And like 5 helicopters went in. I think 2 of them got out with people. 3 of them got shot down by the Russians. And there were some survivors. I have heard, don't know it's a fact, throwing this out there, I have heard the Russians got the survivors, and some of them were Westerners, but maybe Frenchmen or whatever, that they were like intelligence or something that was in there. NATO intelligence was in there with the Azov battalion. I've also heard, and everybody said, well, that's crazy. That was almost a suicide mission to send helicopters in to try to get people out of that. Number 2, they were the Azov battalion. Okay. So this daring rescue mission, trying to get them out, 2 helicopters got away, 3 of them got shot down. Okay. And supposedly the Russians have some of the people that got shot down survived. All right. Then Emmanuel Macron goes to Erdogan. This is the story I'm getting. Erdogan goes to Putin and strikes a deal to get some people out of there. Nobody will tell who it is. Who knows what they gave up, what the deal was, but apparently, and then it appeared on various media, the Russians have agreed with a deal with Erdogan to open a humanitarian corridor to get certain, and they called them hostages, to get some hostages that the Azov battalion was holding and get them out. Well, that makes no sense, because if the Azov battalion's got hostages, they're going to want something for them. They're going to bargain, or they just kill them. They're the Azov battalion. They're just going to shoot them, right? But the story comes out, they're getting hostages out of there, right? The word I'm hearing is that apparently these were some kind of Westerners, and that there's something up with this cement factory, that like this has been involved in some of that. This was like a secret place, that something to do with those bio research labs are going on, and that like they're kind of backed up in there, hold up in there, but there's some real dirty work going on there, something to be revealed. So that's really interesting, that this Azov battalion gets surrounded, mostly taken out. They back out to this, and when they get holed up in their last spot, they try to make an emergency airlift of people. It doesn't work. Macron now has to go through Erdogan and strike a deal with Putin to get some people out of there. And, they probably had to give up a lot in a deal. Anybody will make a deal if there's enough in it for them. So doesn't that sound interesting?
Yeah, I wonder who the Westerners were. Or my first thought was maybe they got Kolomoisky down there.
Oh no, he's in Switzerland. Or Israel. He's back and forth. He doesn't even go. He does his money in Ukraine and all that kind of stuff, but he doesn't even, he ain't going much in Ukraine.
Kate Gowan in our chat room mentions she just saw Patrick Lancaster video of 300 more or less Ukraine Nazi Marines in Mariupol surrendering. Have you been following Patrick Lancaster?
All the time, yeah. Really good.
He's right there, and dynamic and right on the scene. So, yeah, this what's happening in Mariupol right now could uncover some amazing stuff, and we have to wait.
I do feel like, when I found out about those biolabs, and then I heard reports that they were working on bat coronaviruses and all this other stuff, and I started hearing, I thought, there's some real bad business going on with those things. And I think the Russians are holding they're getting everything they can together, and they're holding some real strong aces. And that could be one of the reasons why, because I think this business about the Russians killed X amount of people, they've committed war crimes, I think that's a false flag. But I think the West is desperate, and they're trying to find some way to discredit them, because I think they know what they have. I think they know, though, that they've got the real goods on them, and that some people, these people, Victoria Nuland and these kind of people, they are not nice people. There is no limit to me to what these people will do.
Oh, I agree. And American people have to understand, these people do not have the values that you have.
Right.
American people think, we have American values, and our leaders have American values, and we're not those people. That's not who we are. But guess what? They're not us. These people like Victoria Nuland, they're not your standard American patriots. These people are working for an agenda that has nothing to do with the best interests of the people of the United States of America, or anybody else but themselves, and advancing their own agendas in that the blob.
Can I read something to you real quick? This is an interesting, there was a story in Jacobin magazine. This is very interesting. And basically, how they're telling people, hey, we've got to send stuff to Ukraine. We donate money for the poor Ukrainians, all that kind of stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
Send your socks, whatever the hell, right? Okay, now listen to this. As bombing and shelling ripped through Ukraine's towns and cities in the first week of the invasion, the Ukrainian government still made a scheduled interest payment to its private lenders on time. The lenders, mostly international finance institutions, banks, and hedge funds, are all queuing up to collect their debt with no sign of respite. So, and it goes on to say, Ukraine's total external government debt amounts to $54 billion. The country is set to pay $7.3 billion in debt repayments this year alone. More than half is due to private lenders like banks and hedge funds, while most of the rest is owed to multilateral institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the European Investment Bank. So as they're saying to citizens, oh, these poor Ukrainians, and they've got people. I saw this thing where like some little girl won a prize, and she donated it online to some Ukrainian funds to buy things for the Ukrainians. While they're playing that fake game, and Ukrainian, the war started, which they started, you know what I mean, which they baited, they started everything. They get the war going, and they say, oh, these poor Ukrainians. And meanwhile, they're still getting them to pay billions of dollars on these loans as the bombs are dropping. Now, here's what I think. More things make sense. No wonder they're telling for any number of reasons, Zelensky, no, don't make a deal with the Russians. No, don't make a peace deal. No, they want to try to get as much of their payments as they possibly can to hedge funds, to banks, the IMF, the World Bank. And let me add this. This is the poorest country in Europe. It was a cash game. The whole thing was a grift. The whole thing was they overthrew this country. Hunter Biden, the Pelosi's, the Romneys, and all of the rest. They go in there. They get all of the money they can from these rich people, right? They're robbing a country blind. They're making these loans. They're taking all this money. The whole Ukraine thing was partially, yes, it was. They were going to build bases, and they were going to use it to hassle Russia with. But they can't help themselves. Meanwhile, they're also using it to turn every filthy, greedy, stinking dollar that they can.
And that's what they're supposed to do. That's what they're trained to do. I mean, I think, they go to these schools, or these private schools, and they learn that, all of the values that you learned from your parents and your teachers and all that stuff, that's all just for the plebes, you know. It's not for us. We have different values, and honestly, you're going to have to do some dark stuff, but it's worth it, because just think of what you're going to be able to accomplish in your life if you join with us and, you know, come on over to the dark side and, you know,
Yeah,
do
and let me tell you, when I was at, when I was at Fox News and I was, seeing all that kind of stuff, and I'll never forget, I'll tell, this is an honest truth. There was this group organization, and it was black, like black Republicans, right? And they were actually paid by these think tanks, which were, paid by these wealthy, the types, the billionaire types, right? And they had these guys, young black guys, and they would have them, they'd put you on Fox, they'd put you on the radio, they'd put whatever, right? And these guys, I'm telling you, when you saw them, they had on nothing but Gucci shoes, you know what I mean? They had $10,000 suits on. They had $100,000 Rolexes on, you know what I mean? And so they were paid, and they were, I'd see them in the green room of Fox all the time coming on. At the time, Obama was in, and their job was to say Obama was, was a jerk. That's what they were paid to do. That's, the game. And there was other people paid to say somebody else is a jerk. At any rate, I got approached, and they like literally approached me, and they're like, Garland, hey man, we're doing real well, and blah, blah, blah. And to sum it up, basically what they said was, hey, you're on TV, you wear a nice suit, you speak the Queen's English well, you make a good representation. Basically, ideology doesn't mean nothing. Why don't you just kind of come over here? We'll fix you into our group, and your problems are over, right? And that's the game. You know what I mean? That was the game. The game. And I realized that's the game. They looked at me, they saw me go on TV, and they realized, okay, this guy sounds well. He presents himself on TV, wears a nice suit. He always looks, he's get a haircut and what have you, and his beard trimmed, and he looks like he's ready to get in front of a camera all the time. That's what we need. So it was, and the way they do. What do you want? 300,000, 400,000 a year? You want 100,000, $50,000 expense account? What do you need? Do you want the cars? Do you want the girls? Do you want the drugs? Do you want whatever? God only knows. We want to go what else, other things they may offer. But the game. And I sat there and I saw it. And I saw also at Fox, I realized it's not just Fox, it's all of them. I realized all these people that were coming into the green room, a lot of them worked for these companies. And here's what they did. You're running for Senate, you come to them, they help you get elected. Green room. A lot of them work for these companies. And here's what they did. You're running for Senate, you come to them, they help you get elected. You know what I mean? So when Senator so-and-so is running, and Lockheed Martin and the Wall Street banks and all these people donate to him millions and millions of dollars, behind those people, there's a whole complex that lives off of that money, that says, Senator Nixon, you're running now. Okay, we're going to set this up for you. We're going to do your website. We're going to run you, set up your stops. We're going to make sure you got a plane. We're going to do this. There's a whole complex. And so Lockheed Martin and all these other places funnel money to my campaign I'm running, and I take that money and I pay all these people. And that's part of the grift. You know what I mean? Part of the grift is there's a whole complex of people that's all getting paid off of this stuff. They're all eating very, very well off of this stuff. And there's an insiders group of them. And that's part of the machine. You know what I mean? The people at the top are doing that so they can own the senator. But behind the senator, there's the complex of people who live off of this machine. And guess what? They're on Fox, CNN, MS. You see them, you just don't know who they are. I met the guy who was the Koch brothers money guy. Knew him well. And what I was told is, if you want Koch brothers money, that's the guy you got to go through. And I met all those kinds of people, and they're just handing out cash, man. So it's a big crooked money machine. That part is not left or right, because the people that pay for that stuff, it don't matter who wins. Whoever wins, they're going to get paid either way. But that's something else that I saw, because I was in the midst of that thing.
Yeah, you were right. You were right in the middle of it. Absolutely. And you see these people like Rachel Maddow and Stephen Colbert and that crowd, and they're making 15-20 million dollars a year. I mean, millions and millions of dollars a year. But I don't know. It's hard to, because our whole culture really has stepped away from anything spiritual and anything that has a value that's not something you can convert into dollars and cents. Something that has value in a moral sense, or just in a way that it makes people happy, or this is great, or more spiritually thinking of thinking about the heritage of the country, the founding fathers, and the the work and all the dedication that has gone into building what we hope will be a free country, one day. But the desire, the dream, the idea of uplifting people's spirits and to try to make this country into what we were told as children, that we are special, that we are a country that had never existed before. As a matter of fact, we are the brave new world in a way that the people got free from the empires and the slavery and serfdom of the past when they came to the United States. At least the Europeans did. Hopefully, we can look at it as a struggle, towards justice, towards freedom, towards liberty for everyone. Justice and liberty for all, liberty and justice for all. Why can't we keep that as our guiding star, instead of just it's gone from our culture. The idea of America being a great place is gone from our culture. It's just, yeah, you're offered an opportunity to make a whole lot of money, have a good life, send your kids to the best colleges. And if you don't do that, then you're going to kind of look like a chump to a lot of people. Why didn't you? Let's personalize it, Garland. How did you feel when you walked away from it? And did you have colleagues that maybe have felt a little strange about the idea that they were taking the bait and you were walking away?
Well, the thing about it was I never considered it. It never dawned on me, because the other thing about this, what you're talking about now is, and it's even worse than we're refused to accept that there's a culture or a history or anything that you should be proud of or you should try to maintain or anything you should do or like. We live in it's the Hollywood, like, intelligence, a combination of the intelligence community in Hollywood, where nothing is real. Everything is a fake. And you're not even allowed to discuss things. You're not allowed to discuss when they put something out there. You're not allowed to have an honest discussion about it. If you try to have an honest discussion about things now, it's put forward as negative. Let me give you a perfect example. I'm not going to get into it, but there's a transgender person now that swims. And it was a person was born a biological male, and then they were ranked 532nd as a swimmer, and then they did the change or whatever and became the #1 swimmer, and they're breaking records and all that kind of stuff. Now, I do believe that it's legitimate to have a conversation about whether or not that is fair to the women who were born biological females. That's a fair conversation. That's not saying I don't believe that person should be discriminated against. I don't believe they should be harmed or not allowed in stores or to work,
all right,
whatever,
ladies and gentlemen,
earn a living and do whatever they want.
You can find that great interview between Garland Nixon and John O'Loughlin on McDuff Lives on YouTube. Thank you once again to John for your presentation you did at the Arlington National Cemetery today. And part of the reason is he wants to make sure his father gets recognized and buried in Arlington National Cemetery as well. And that is one of the goals that we have here at neighborhoodnewsstudio.com and screamingaspreys.com. We've had many charrettes on Mystery Island in Maryland, and we all helped putting together this book, organizing the notes, organizing the pictures, putting the storyline together. And it was a big, long 26-day project, I believe, that was kicked off with the January 6th insurrection event in Washington, D.C. So this book was birthed out of that weekend as well, and you can find it at screamingaspreys.com. McDuff Lives: The Life and Untimely Death of Thomas F. OLoughlin Jr. It gets into his military career on the USS Nashville, and then into Saxa, the man hired to take down